Good morning, everyone. My name is Tevin. I'm the Kickstart executive here at Pathway CTM. I'll be facilitating your session today. Very shortly, you're going to hear from Tajira and Philip, but before handing over, I do want to make you aware of our Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. If you have any burning questions that you'd like to ask Tajira or Philip during the presentation, do feel free to put it in and I'll flag it and I'll raise it. Otherwise, at the end of the presentation, we'll have a few minutes for you to ask any questions that you'd like the answer to. If you're watching this call or webinar recorded and you have any questions, do feel free to email in at student@pathwayctm.com. That's student@pathwayctm.com. But without further ado, Tajira and Philip, over to you guys.
Perfect. Phil.
Right, good morning all. Thank you for attending our presentation today. The topic is chemistry and how it can affect us in our daily lives. Our profession, as you'll find out as we go through this presentation, is more on the health and safety side of things. We deal with a lot of legislation, regulations in our daily working environment. And today we're using the COSHH regulations, which, as you can see on the screen there, is control of substances hazardous to health. Okay, go to the next slide, please, Tajira. Right, just a brief introduction to ourselves before we start. We work for a company called Pollard and Partners. We are a multidisciplined consultancy, which has been running for 65 years. We deal with all aspects of the construction industry. We work with many different clients, from private sector to schools to government, commercially, housing. We deal with an awful lot of things, certainly all in construction, which is, as you'll find out about our role, that we try and look after the individuals that are working on construction sites, and we maintain health and safety throughout, so that the individual workers not only go to site in the morning, but they go home to their families and they go home safely. Next slide, please, Tajira.
So I will start with this bit. So how I got into health and safety was I initially wanted to go along the construction or site manager route, and kind of along the way I preferred, or I liked, health and safety a lot more, so I furthered kind of my studies in health and safety, which is kind of how I ended up there. It's not really an interesting story, as you hear Phil's story in a bit, but mine is somewhat something. Phil?
I wouldn't say mine's interesting, it's just a lot longer, as I'm a lot older. Maybe you've heard of the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. That was the first time that legislation came into being real meaningful within the construction industry. I've worked in the construction industry from 1977. My first real encounter of it was when I was working overseas in Indonesia, working on an oil refinery, and I was billeted or living with 5 guys working on the construction site, one of which was the health and safety manager, and the other one was a fire officer. Through living with those guys, working 60 hours a week, we did discuss a lot of topics. And as you can imagine, the oil refinery was 225,000 barrel a day refinery, which probably means nothing to you guys. But if I said it was 3.5 miles by 6.5 miles across, it's a big refinery. There was a lot of people working there. I think at any one time we had a workforce of in excess of 18,000 people. So as you can imagine, there were a lot of incidents, accidents, just in the normal working environment, apart from the heavy machinery that we had. So from that, I got a real interest in health and safety, but my opportunity didn't really arise until 1993, when the CDM regs came into force, but they weren't a legal requirement until the following year. And from that, I've been working in health and safety for the last 27 years. I do tend to find it interesting because not every day is the same. We might have the same aspects on a certain number of things, but there's always something different, whether it be the people, the project that you're working on, but the different aspects of problems that you get, whether they be a risk, a hazard, or, and in this presentation, we're looking at chemicals. So I find it very interesting. A lot of people don't, but it all depends what you like in life. Okay, Jadira.
Thank you so much. So this isn't what we're talking about, but it's just to give you an idea, because you will see a small picture at the side that just says Loucher, and it's just to give you an idea of what it is. So what it is a new approach for learners and apprentices to help them identify and understand health and safety risk in their area of study. It basically allows young people and new workers to learn about the risk and showcase how they can protect their own and fellow workers' health, safety, and well-being. So that's what Loucher is, just to get that one out of the way a bit. As you can see, the image just at the top there. So as Phil mentioned in the beginning, we will be talking about COSHH and what it is. COSHH is, as it says there, the control of substances hazardous to health. So the fundamental principles of COSHH, of the COSHH law, are very similar to any other law. It's about knowing the hazards, being risk aware, having risk assessments in place, and reviewing to see if things work properly. Employers, us as health and safety advisors, and as well as your school, should take action to prevent or adequately control your exposure to hazardous substances. In most cases, it's practical for employers to put in place adequate control measures at the point where there's a hazardous substance is being generated, so that you don't have to rely on protective equipment, PPE. Fast on site, per se, on a construction site, which is what we focus on, if an employee can take a control measure to, per se, stop a contractor sweeping up wood dust off the floor, we try to put measures in place to prevent and control that. For example, controlling it will be implementing a high filtration efficiency vacuum cleaner to vacuum up all the dust, the wood dust on site, to prevent your exposure to it. Or preventing it would be pre-cutting or pre-molding those components off-site. So then you won't have to do that on site, which basically completely crosses that out the way of you having to cut any wood on site. So that's just an idea of what we'll be talking about. So next slide. So hazardous substances, or the term hazardous substances, can be placed in 5 broad categories. That's manufactured chemicals and products, natural and process generated substances, microbiological agents, waste materials. For manufactured chemicals and substances, we're looking at stuff like paintbrushes, brush cleaners, decreasing solvents, WD-40s, floor cleaners. For natural substances, we're looking at proteins and citrus oils. Substance generated during work activities, we're looking at stone cutting, which produces stone dust, wood sawing, which produces wood dust, flour loading, which basically produces flour dust, as it says in the name, and diesel engine exhaust fume generated by vehicles or machines. Microbes and germs, we're looking at bacteria in unmaintained metal, metal fluid sums. COVID-19 virus is a form of bacterial germ that is a hazardous substance. And just waste in general, all that under waste is a hazardous substance also. So that's kind of the 5 broad categories we look at. So this was initially meant to be a game. I can't really see anyone that's on this, so and it's kind of giving my answer away, but the idea of this was to guess which one was not a hazardous substance. And as it says there, orange oil used in food factories is not a hazardous substance. So orange is not a substance hazardous to health, but citrus oils extracted from these types of fruits or used at work are hazardous substances because they can cause irritation to your skin. So that was my game, which kind of gave itself away, but next slide. Okay, so on here we're looking at manufactured hazardous chemicals and products used at work. This diagram basically shows the symbols you should see whenever there's a hazardous substance. I don't know how many of you have driven or been in a car behind a truck that has one of these symbols on there, and it kind of says, you know, keep your distance because we have hazardous chemicals, etc. on this truck, etc. So manufactured hazardous chemicals and products used at work should be supplied with something called a safety data sheet, and it should have labels and hazard signs on them. So you'll need to know roughly how to identify what hazard signs are on products, labels associated with products you use in your work area, even in school, I don't know, in your science classes, what chemicals, etc. you use, and what kind of symbols you would see on these. Okay, hearing feedback. But yeah, this is the sort of signs you'll be looking out for when it comes to looking at hazardous substances. So hazardous substances can be presented in all these forms listed on the screen. So solids, we're looking at asbestos. A lot of us have heard of asbestos. It is in quite a lot of buildings today. If your building was built prior to 1999, it may have asbestos in it, it may not, because a lot of projects these days are looking to remove asbestos from their buildings. So it's not a must, but it may have asbestos in it. Dust, everyday dust, building dust, woodwork dust, abrasive dust, any form of dust we're looking at that can be hazardous to your bodies. Fumes, oil-fired boilers, gas boilers, although those are very unlikely in your schools, but those are the sort of things we're looking at. Fumes, local road traffic, ventilation systems, local farms, pesticides, cleaning agents, weed killers, liquids, we're looking at cleaning agents as well, oils, solvents, paints, vapors, pretty much the same as fumes. Mitts, mainly from sprays, especially in art classes, lubricants and metal work. Gases, we're looking at some process from carbon monoxide generated from diesel engines. So if you're coming to school and you're around diesel cars, etc., you more than likely have been exposed to carbon monoxide. Sorry, I am reading my notes on another screen, so bear with if my eyes have gone somewhere else. So hazardous substance found at work, again, as we mentioned, can be presented in different forms. So this is what we would have to deal with on the construction site mainly. So mortar mix in wet form, it can contact workers' skin and cause irritation and burns. When dry, it can become powdery and float in the air to cause inhalation exposure. So caustic soda crystals in a bag, also known as sodium hydroxide. It's used for soaps and candle making. When made into a solution and sprayed, they can be in aerosol form in the air and could lead to inhalation exposure. The manufacturer of the caustic soda has taken basic prevention actions by making it powdery metals into micro pellets. So for example, when transferring into a mixing bucket, pellets will significantly reduce the airborne dust, so long as the bag is stored and transferred with care to prevent crushing of the bag and its contents. So next slide. So this is as you see it. We're looking at silica dust, wood dust and flower dust, and how those can be generated, also how those can become airborne. So it is as it says on the slide. Okay, so risk to your health from exposure to a hazardous substance is associated with 5 main factors, and the hazardous properties of the substance. For example, wood dust is a respiratory and skin irritant and sensitizer. Some types of wood dust can act as carcinogen and which basically means it can cause cancer. How does the exposure take place? It can take place through eyes, skin ingestion or breathing in. The level of exposure. So when we look at the level of exposure to hazardous substances, and whether it's dust, it's exposure to hazardous asbestos particles, apologies. So we look at how much have you been exposed to? So we look at it based on concentration. So how the volume of the amount you have been exposed to in a certain time. So how long and how frequently, for example, workers may be exposed to bleach spray at very high concentration for a few minutes and suffer severe respiratory problems. On other times, they may be exposed to low concentration every day for about 3 hours and may suffer lung problems after some time, days, month, year.
Oh, I think she's frozen out. Philip, we'll just give her a second. Perhaps her internet just crashed, isn't it?
I've just asked her to reconnect.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna.
So yeah, as I was saying, I'm not sure where I came off, so I'm just going to go back through slide 12. So risk to your health from exposure to hazardous substances is associated with 5 main factors. The hazardous properties of the substances, for example, wood dust is respiratory and skin irritant and a sensitizer. Some types of wood dust can act as a carcinogen, again, can cause cancer. And how does the exposure take place? It's through eye, skin, injection, or breathing. We also look at the level of exposure, how much dust. We look at this in concentration, duration of exposure, how long and how frequently. For example, workers may be exposed to a high concentration of a hazardous substance for a few minutes and suffer respiratory problems, or other times they may be exposed to low concentration every day for about 3 hours and may suffer lung problems after some time, days, months, or year. Exposure to wood dust can cause irritation of the respiratory system or cancer, and the consequences include irritant cough, breathing difficulties, asthma, and lung cancer. Is everyone still there? Just checking this time. Okay, according to the HSE, nearly 50 busloads of workers are dying each year due to lung disease caused by inhalation exposure to substances hazardous to health. One busload is roughly 60 people, and nearly 150 busloads are dying due to work-related cancer caused by hazardous substances. So our job as health and safety advisors, as Phil will tell you, is to try and ensure that the contractor on a site has put all measures possible in place to prevent or control any form of risk or any form of hazardous substance being inhaled or coming in contact with your skin, etc. We want to minimize the amount of people dying each year. So that's our job as health and safety advisors. So this is quite self-explanatory. Just have a quick look at a few of the target organs that we tend to have hazardous substance, target. So brain, normally lead, nasal passage, organic solvents, lung, asbestos, chlorine, carbon dioxide, ammonia, silica, organic solvents, Legionella. So this is just a rough idea of how they target these organs. So what should an employer do to protect your health when using hazardous substances? This is summarized in 6 key essential steps. We look at these steps in details on the next slide. So just to have an idea of what these steps are, it's about risk assessment and putting in place preventive or control measures, prepare and support employees, ensure correct use and maintenance of controls, carry out any work surveys as needed, and prepare for emergencies. So risk assessment is about, carrying out an assessment of the works or the area you'll be working in and the works that will be conducted in this area. And the prevention of control must put in place steps needed before work starts. So in our industry or in the construction industry, if we're doing per se works on a school that was built, as I said before, 1999, we're looking on the area that we're working in, ensuring that there's no form of asbestos which can be tampered with, and once that's tampered with, it can release asbestos fibers airborne, which can be inhaled. So just an idea of what we deal with in this industry. So preparing and support employees, so providing training and supervision. We do recommend contractors provide all their operatives with inductions before they start on site, having their RAMs, and what RAMs are is a risk assessment method of statements, and basically just outlining any risk that may be present in the task they're doing and how they will control that, as well as how they'll carry out the works they're doing safely. Use and maintain, must ensure and control, use correctly, check regularly, tested regularly and thoroughly maintained. Surveys, again, when it comes back to asbestos, we carry out surveys if we're not sure, to ensure that, is this definitely asbestos, is it not? So we always want to be safe whenever it comes to asbestos. Planning for emergencies as well. You never know, something can surprise you on site. We're always getting surprises on site, so it's always ensuring that we don't leave any space or any room for any form of surprises when it comes to hazardous substances or any form of risk in general. So this is roughly what a safety data sheet is and what we look for. Normally we collect these from the contractor at the end of a project, but also just so we have, what we create is a health and safety file, which we give to, if we did a works on your school per se, we would create a health and safety file, which would be handed over to your school at the end, which would basically say if there's hazardous substance somewhere in the school, they're aware that it's there. And it's stated in their file that this was used in the school. The paint per se may be hazardous. This is the sort of paint we use, and this is the hazard. So a green man is only an indication that you may cross the road. You still have to look right, look left, and look right again before stepping onto that dangerous road. There's always one rule-breaking person, a rule-breaking trucker, one mom with her pushchair crossing the road. There's always someone rule-breaking. So it is simple. The green man is only one of the sources in your risk assessment and one of the steps in your risk control measure to crossing the road safely and preventing the consequences of not falling down and getting injured or even killed. In the same way, a safety data sheet is one of the information sources for getting to know about the hazardous substances. Your employer will use it to determine task or process or an activity specific to risk assessment, which include all the steps needed for risk control. These are needed to protect you and other employees' health and safety. This is the same with schools. Schools have to ensure that your health and safety is priority, and they have to put all measures in place to ensure that your health, safety, and well-being is solid. So we do hear a lot of myths when it comes to hazardous substances, and it's a natural substance and it cannot hurt. That's not true. For example, exposure to flour, wood dust, and silica dust can cause ill health. We have used this substance for a long time, and in a way, we are using it today, so it must be safe. Not true. Also, some harmful effects of exposure can take decades before taking hold and showing up. Example, lung cancer. What do you expect? It's a dirty job. I'm pretty sure I've heard that a few times going on a construction site, and I'm sure Phil has also. I've heard this quite a lot from especially quite older contractors who've been in the industry for a long time, and they're convinced, I've done this for many years and it is a dirty job. We're fine. This is not true. It doesn't have to be a dirty job. There's lots of ways you can make a job safe and good and not put yourself in harm's way or put yourself at risk. So on the left-hand side of this illustration shows correct control actions put in place. So the barriers are in place to prevent the operator working in the fume zone, a larger and significantly enclosing hood. The area of the fume, I don't know if you can all see that, but the section we've got the two gentlemen literally head in the fume, and the extractor fan above is pretty much not really doing its job because they probably inhaled the majority of that fume already. Whereas you have the other gentleman with a larger hood, he's outside that danger zone, and the fume is directly going upwards into the fan, completely minimizing his risk to those fumes. So this is a sort of checklist we look for. So does any product you use have a danger label on it? This is what we try to look for. So the danger labels, as you can see in slide 8, when I showed you earlier, was the diamond symbols. So those are the sort of danger labels you're looking for. Does your task/process produce dust, sprays, fume, gas, or vapors? Is the substance harmful to breathe in? Is the substance harmful to your skin? Are you coming into contact because the way you are using it? What control measures are in place that you are using? So that's the sort of checklist you should be looking at, or contractors on our site, we tend to have them look at. So to conclude, chemical and dangerous substances are around us wherever we are, even walking to school, as I mentioned before. Carbon monoxide from vehicles, from diesel engine vehicles are inhaled regularly. The asbestos fibers was actually a fun fact I learned a few days ago from Phil, and it's asbestos fibers are still technically in the air at a low concentration. So we probably still do breathe in asbestos fibers every day. And when we do have control over the concentration at which we are exposed to these substances, we try to control and prevent this as best we can to minimize health-related risk. So any questions?
That was a brilliant presentation, Phil and Tajira. Thank you so much for that. Do you have any questions in the chat? Interestingly, I have a question actually. Well, starting with you, Phil, you clearly have a wealth of experience in this sector. I'm quite interested to know how your role and the industry itself has changed over the years.
It's quite simple, really. Is that the legislation that came about that I mentioned in 1974 was shunned. It wasn't really considered the thing to do, because the death rate was very high on construction sites, and people realised that we've got to prevent this, we've got to stop this. So more and more legislation has been put forward, and more contractors are safety conscious. So when you look at a project now, we look at their track record, what they've done previously. Have they had any problems? Have they had any accidents? And we see that the standard, what shall we say, 74, I think there was something like 350 construction workers died per annum.
Wow.
Over that period of time, and I know it's quite a long time now, but the last figures that I saw were around about 2008, something like that, and we were down to 18 deaths. So from that, you can see that the legislation that's been put in place, the protections, we've got various different additions to scaffolding, whereas before people could fall off scaffolding. Now we have it that we have a certain height barrier. We have another barrier in between. We have kickboards, so that it's a lot more difficult for people to have accidents. But as we've always said in the industry, 85% of it is common sense.
Yeah.
Just don't be stupid with anything that you don't understand.
Yeah, you say that, but you'll be very surprised with some of the stuff you see when you go on a construction site. You say don't be stupid, but there is some stuff that you see going on a site. It's crazy. Very crazy.
I can imagine. And I suppose segueing on from that point, Tajira, I'm quite interested to know what's your daily routine? Is there a routine you follow, or is every day different?
I feel like every day is a little bit different. There's not really a routine. So apart, well, I don't know how to word that now. There's not
I
really
think if I could just interrupt, Tajira, that Tevin, the whole routine of your daily chores has changed immensely. You guys wouldn't understand this, but I've worked pre-emails. If you had something in the post, you got that at a certain time, normally after lunch. Then you could deal with it, but you knew what you were going to do for that morning. Now you get an email straight away, something's happened, and you have to react to it. So you cannot plan your day at all.
It's more saying I may get emails saying, we're starting on site on Monday, and then my job is literally to jump in place. Okay, now we need to get everything sorted for them to start on site on Monday, because it's around the corner and we haven't done anything health and safety wise as yet. We haven't checked their plans. We haven't checked they've had risk assessments in place. We haven't checked they've got anything. So I've now got to jump in action and make sure that's all in place for them to start on Monday. So you never know what you might get in an email, and that kind of just changes your whole day. So there's not really a routine. It's about getting ready to jump in action if something comes in.
Right. So it's an incredibly fast-paced environment. Well, with that being said, what key skills should students have if they're looking to get into the sector?
I think it's like anything in life. It's being able to prioritize, which is the most important. If you've got a job that you've got to do by 5 o'clock tonight, but it only affects you, and you've got a job that's got to be done as soon as possible because it affects 5 other people, prioritize, and you've got to deal with that 5 other people first.
True.
Yeah.
Would you piggyback off that, Tajira?
I must say, for me personally, I didn't pick health and safety as my first option. It was never something that I thought I was going to do. So I actually just went along that route because I wanted to initially be a site manager, and I worked on site for a while, and it just wasn't for me, and I preferred the health and safety route. Like I would see the health and safety guys come on site, and they would always, be on your case, and I'm the one who's like getting everything together. Yes, we've got everything in place, we've got this, and I was just I was keen to like learn more about the health and safety side, and that's how I kind of got into it. But luckily for me, my course kind of entailed a bit of everything because I studied construction management. It was a bit of health and safety, a bit of quantity surveying, a little bit of the whole industry, if that makes sense. I was able to kind of, steer to the health and safety side a bit. So I don't know. If it is something you want to do, then you just have to figure out that route for you to take. Everyone's route is completely different. Even being in my office now, I feel like everyone is taking a different route to me anyways.
Well, that's interesting, and I'm quite excited to hear your answer for this one, Philip, too. What's your favorite part of your role? Philip, I'll start with you.
I think there's an old adage that was used. What's the first law of engineering? And the first law of engineering is not knowing everything, but knowing where to find information on it. And once you can find information on it, how you deal with it and how you interpret it. I've used this example a few times that depending on the age of the property, and if we're converting it, and it's an old scheme that may have lath and plaster in there instead of just a plasterboard wall, we sort of say, well, have you had an anthrax survey? And people look at you and go, what are you talking about? What is anthrax? And you have to explain that. And I enjoy that part of it because it's being knowledgeable, I think I would say.
Yeah.
And that only comes through experience and on an awful lot of projects.
How about you, Tajira?
I would say I think my best bits of this is going on site, actually visiting the sites. Because you do find you do learn so much, like you never stop learning in this sort of job, and you do come across a lot of things. I think when I first started in the industry, because I went to Kingston University, and one of the things when I left was I think they found a World War II bomb at the uni, and I was thinking, oh God, like why wasn't I working on that site when that happened? I just wanted to see it. There's just so many things you come across. Like it's all interesting, but again, it is a bit scary when you're finding a huge bomb on your site. It's not cool. But I just like all that stuff, the excitement of that stuff. Not that it's not safe, but it's just the excitement of learning about that, seeing it, having the experience of knowing what to do and things like that as well. So yeah, I love the site visits, and me personally, I'm quite tiny, and so when I go on site and you have all these big men like just around me, they just sort of look at you and they're like, oh, okay, this little girl's like on our site telling us what to do. So I quite like that. But yeah.
Can I just agree with Tajira that I've been working a lot longer than probably both of you. I'm coming up for retirement. I'm 61 next month. I've been working in the construction industry since 1977. I can say and back up fully that you never stop learning. There is always something different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we touched upon it, I suppose, very briefly earlier, but one of my whole things in my role as a Kickstart executive is about providing value, whether it's providing value for employers or applying value for students. And so I suppose concluding, and I'd like to, hear an answer from both of you, but what's one piece of advice you would give someone that's wanting to get into both your, line of work? Tajira, we can start with you.
I think for me, so I say this to my siblings also. So getting into it, whatever job you want to get into in the case, not just my line of work, but whatever job you want to get into, you need to figure out what route you want to go. So obviously from college or sixth form, etc., the next step initially would be university, right? Sure. But I've had to tell everyone if the university route isn't for you, there is apprenticeships out there as well. And I per se had wished I'd done an apprenticeship, because I feel like a lot of people in my sector as well probably have done that too. But just to give you an idea of what you're going into before you go there. So if you decide to do an apprenticeship and you work in the industry for say a year, and then you can decide, okay, like this is for me, like I will go to university after this and further my education, and then from there go back into whatever field you think, okay, yeah, this is for me. But I don't know, I think you just have to figure out that route after uni. You have to make sure, not after college, sorry, and you have to make sure that route is the route you want to go into. Because I wish I had done an apprenticeship. I probably would have had more experience in the industry before. But yeah, that's just my opinion anyways.
Sure, thank you, Jira and Philip.
I was the day release route. I went to college. I did a full day and a night classes for 5 years to become an electrical design engineer. I've done various different works, different titles. I've got a whole selection of business cards of different roles that I've fulfilled throughout my working career. But I think this is the one that I've stuck up the longest because I enjoy it the most. I think, in answering your initial question, that I think you have to have an open mind. And as Tajira has said there are many different routes that you can go. It's what are your interests. If you can find a employment in something that you're interested in, it then doesn't become a chore.
Yeah.
If you are working at a job where you can't wait for 5 o'clock to come so you can go home, you shouldn't be in that job.
Exactly.
Try and find something that you enjoy.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. It's been a brilliant presentation. I've personally gained a lot of value on it too, which is really interesting. So again, on behalf of Pathway CTM, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Phil and Tajira, for presenting your slides too. It's been amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's all down to Tajira.